when you're not just talking to a glassy lens, isn't there? I think all of us have had the experience in our lives of setting out in a new way, maybe taking on a new adventure or following our heart's desire. And we're fired up, right? But as we move down that journey, down that path, roadblocks come up. Sometimes pretty significant roadblocks, right? Things that we weren't anticipating. And they can bring up a lot of doubt, and our insecurities can come up. We can tend to want to pull back. And if they're really significant, we may abandon the whole journey. It's interesting because these very things that we're called to are often inviting us to break open in a way, to move into a new way of being instead of the patterned way that we've gotten used to. And even, if we've tried something new in the past and done it for a while, it can become patterned. And so we heard in the songs already this morning that Spirit is always alive in us, not stagnant, but alive and fresh in us. And yet these roadblocks come up. And roadblocks are good. In the unity that I grew up in, we were taught that if our consciousness was pure enough, you could just hold an idea in mind, move towards that, and it would manifest. And if you were experiencing roadblocks, then there was something in your consciousness that you needed to work on. We have evolved. And what we understand is that would be pretty boring, just to sit on your couch and go, okay, I want a new car, No, we actually develop. We come into understanding the fullness of what we are as a spiritual being through these challenges. And to understand that we're never alone, right? That the Spirit is always working with us. So I became curious. This week I started reading stories of overcoming, people overcoming these unanticipated challenges on the path. And the number one thing that I heard that got them through was the support of others, their family, their friends, professionals, coworkers. But I want to propose to you today that there had to be something else going on, something moving at a deeper level. And that, I would say, is essential will. Our divine will, if you will. Because, let me first just tell you how I'm defining essential will. Will is that quality of spirit, that quality of our true nature that gives us tenacity, that gives us that feeling that we will get through whatever is going on in our lives now. Will not only says, I will, but it goes a step further and says, and I have what it takes. I have what it takes. What an amazing support that is, right? And the reason I say that, along with the support of our fellow human beings, which we all need, we're human beings, and while we all need different levels of socialization, we're social human beings. We rely on one another. But how many of you have had the opportunity, the experience of seeing the potential in someone and talking until you were blue in the face, helping them to recognize that potential, and they still could not step out and take any kind of movement towards achieving that potential, applying for that university, leaving that job that wasn't satisfying, or even applying for another job. The list can go on and on. We need will. And I'm making a contrast here between essential will and the will of the ego. Because you see, the ego is always trying to approximate your divineness, the essentialness of who you are. And so, of course, ego has its own version of will. We often call it willfulness, or in spiritual circles, we call it false will. What does it look like? Well, it's stubborn. And it's very focused on getting to the outcome at the cost, often, of ourselves and others. It doesn't really care. It's inflexible. So it doesn't really care if we're tired or if the journey we're on is not really a good journey for us. It's just, this is what you need, and here's what we're going to do. It blows right through like a bull in a china shop to get to where it thinks we needs to be. And if it's really out of control, it has no trouble running over anybody else to get there. In contrast, our essential will is actually very gentle. It doesn't need to push. It supports. And it's very malleable. So if something comes up in our path, it'll say, well, let's see what's behind door number 1. That might work, but okay, but what other options do we have? What's behind doors 2 and 3? And if you start marching down one journey and it becomes clear, it doesn't need to push any further. It just supports us in moving in the direction we need to get to that final destination. And even the destination can change. But we don't give up. There's space in essential will for creativity. There's space to hear additional guidance. I will. And I can. So this seems like a good spot to just pause for a moment and to check in. Where in your life have you seen false will play out in your life? And false will can also manifest as collapse. That's a form of will that says, I won't. That's stubbornness coming up. And then where in your life has essential will come up? Where you have felt that support that says, yeah, this is a whole new venture for me. I'm a little nervous about it, but I have this sense that I can do it. And I will do it. And yeah, it took a lot of maneuvering, but in retrospect, we made it to where we were to get. It's very satisfying to really open to will. And so it begs the question then, what does allow us to have more access to this quality of will? There can be literally tons of different obstacles to will that can be in our consciousness. And I'm not going to focus on a lot of those today. I want to bring our focus to commitment. Because commitment and will are in this interesting dance together. I read a few things this week that said that commitment is actually an expression of will. That makes some sense, right? If you're committed to something, then there's something that's supporting you and really staying with it. But in the same way, when we are committed, when we are really committed, then it invites will. So, what is it that is an indicator of real commitment? And I propose to you today that it is when we align with something that is true to us. You see, we live in a culture that is constantly bombarding us with images. We've come out of a family that's told us, well, not everyone, but many of us came out of a family that we were told how we should look, what career we should have, the kind of person that we should be in relationship with. And it's been drummed into us so often that we can feel committed to it. But do you see, it's on shaky ground. Is it our truth? Does it ring true for us? It's in our willingness to check out what is true for us that we're able to invoke will. And it's not like we get to, so often in unity we say, yeah, just call upon your will. My experience is that as I have cleared the way and come to trust, will arises, any of the qualities that are needed in the moment, they rise. I don't have to sit there and go, well, let's see, what quality do I need now? It's immediately adjusting to what we need. So there's a story in the Bible that's really symbolically helps us understand this activity of will and commitment. It's Jonah and the big fish. Do you kind of remember the story? I had to go back and read it, but it's one of those things. This week I kept thinking, why is this big fish coming to me every time I think about this talk? And at first I was Googling whale. It's not a whale, it's a big fish. So here's what's happened. Jonah has received very clear guidance that he's supposed to go to Nineveh, which is a nearby town, and he's supposed to express the will of God. And Jonah doesn't think it's going to be received very well. So he decides not to go. It's always our choice, right? We don't need to follow the truth because, that kind of guidance is a truth in us. But we don't need to accept it. So he buys fare on a boat, and they head out, and just about the time they get too far away from land where they could just jump over and swim to shore, a horrific storm blows in. Giant waves, and the wind is blowing. And the crew becomes suspicious. They've never seen a storm like this, and they're a seasoned crew. They become suspicious that someone has fallen out of favor with God. And Jonah had made the mistake of divulging to a couple of them that he was on this boat because he didn't want to go to Nineveh. So they called Jonah up. Jonah says, yeah, I'm sure it's me. And really, I think you should throw me overboard. You'll all be saved if you do. They don't really want to do that. They don't want to have the death of someone on their hands, but they row and they try and get the sails going. They can't get that boat moving in anywhere in the direction they want. And so they take him up on his offer and they chuck him over the side. So let's stop there and just look at the symbolism of it. So a big storm, metaphysically, represents living life when we feel separate, when we don't understand our relationship to our nature. And what happens then is all these things are going on in the world, and they leave us just feeling like, we're going from one low to a big high to a big low, and then you have the winds coming and they're blowing you off course, and you just feel like you're a victim to life. That all these things are happening and you have no influence, right? Anybody be able to relate to that? And not all the time, just at times, right, in our lives. And so, now I had a little analogy of what him being tossed into the water meant. But anyway, we don't feel like there's any way we can get out of it, right? So what does he just say? Well, just toss me in the water. I'm a loser anyway. You're out of touch with yourself. So we pick up the story again. And instead of drowning, this giant fish comes and swallows him. Now, I was reading in Elizabeth Sand Turner, and she says, what a horrible thing. But she was about the only one that said it was a horrible thing, because he would have drowned in that ocean if it wasn't for the fish. And when you look up the metaphysics of fish, it's truth. A fish represents truth. So here you are, you're out thinking you can do life on your own. You're not really oriented towards turning within and finding out what your truth in the moment is. You're just trying to figure it out, and you can't really figure it out, and it's just all such a jumble. And all of a sudden, you get swallowed by the truth. Now, how many of you have thought that you really are swallowing the truth? Right? That, yeah, I really need to take the truth in. Really need to allow it. But the truth is, I guess there's going to be a lot of truth in this statement. The truth is that the truth actually swallows us. When we are open to the truth, it has an impact on the moment. He's in the fish for 3 days. That's just the number of completion for the truth to have do its work on us. And then what happens to him? The fish spits him out on dry land, back on the terra firma, right? I am not being thrown around by life anymore. Oh, got to tell you one more thing. The minute the fish swallowed him, the minute the truth swallowed him, what happened to the ocean? Instantly went calm. Are you ready for that? Really? I mean, are you ready to stop being tossed in the ocean, blown off course by the wind? And what came up when the truth swallowed him? It was the will. You see, the will tells us we can and we will, no matter what the circumstances around us. So let's go to that quote, Bonnie. Ed Rabel, I had to see what Ed Rabel had to say about it. You know, Ed was my metaphysics teacher when I was in Unity Seminary. The fact that this fish came illustrates the fact that no matter how complicated a dilemma that we may find ourselves in, and no matter what caused it, God will always provide the right idea of truth to come to us if we allow it to swallow us. You see, Jonah initially, when he received this guidance, which was the truth of what his soul was to do, he couldn't swallow it. He couldn't allow it to swallow him, is really the better thing to say. He ran. And so we have our work to do around truth. Can we trust the truth? Can we trust that essential will really maneuver us, work with all the other qualities, help us maneuver through whatever life is throwing at us? It takes some work. But when we get to that point, the truth has impact. Do you remember a few weeks ago, I told you the story about a friend of mine who's a consultant. She had developed a relationship with a company prior to COVID. She'd actually done quite a bit of work for this company. It was a very lucrative job for her. And before COVID hit, they had agreed that it was time to take the entire company through an employee development process. They had it all planned. Then COVID hit, and as so many things happened in life, it just all got kind of shut down. They just said, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen to our business, so let's just put this on hold. And then during COVID, they replaced one of their key managers. And the new manager loved the idea. She really saw the need for this development, but she came in with her own ideas of what that development could look like. She had her own cadre of consultants that she had worked with, and she was, just not in a negative way, but just throwing out, are we sure we shouldn't do this and doing that? And as my friend was brought back into the discussion, she was really hearing that there was no agreement about how this should be done. And one of her truths was that if you can't bring the entire executive team on board with what's going to happen, then you're really not going to be successful at this work to develop all the employees. And so she wrote an email to the president saying, really have enjoyed our work together, but I'm not getting that your team is all on board with my process, and I'm going to bow out at this point. Oh, no, he said. You're not understanding, or they're not understanding. I'm really on board with your process. Let's have a meeting. And so she participated in a Zoom meeting with all of them. And again, it was better than she thought it was going to be. But at the same time, there were some indications during the meeting that not everybody was seeing it the same way. They said they'd get back to her within a week. After a week, she didn't hear anything, and she just decided, I really need to trust my guidance here. We're not going to do this work. And she sent him one of those emails that just said, thanks so much, but I just really don't feel we should be working together. As life happens, she was drawn a couple of days later to her spam folder. And there, she found a host of emails from this actual manager, the new manager, saying, totally impressed with your presentation. I agree. You are the one to do the work. We are all on board. Other emails saying, we looked at your proposal. We assume your rate is higher this year than last year. Tell us what the number is. We really want to get you in as soon as possible. And the storm began. Right? I mean, she said, there's a part of me that is all invested in the fact that my abundance comes from the work I do, and here is a big fat job that's paid me huge dollars in the past, being laid right in front of me, my judges all over me, why did you have to send that email so quickly, and you've got to backpedal now, there's got to be some way to get out of this, and she called me in the midst of the storm. It's a rough place to be. And all I said to her after hearing her out was, well, what if we take a deep breath together and you go in and check out what the truth is today? And notice I said what the truth is today, because truth evolves for us as we engage with truth. As we engage with our life, our truth becomes more clarified in different areas. And as situations change, truth isn't rigid, it's malleable. So what's the truth today? She closed her eyes. Well, I don't know. We were on a phone call. I don't know what she did exactly. But, less than a minute later, she comes back and goes, by golly, I'm not supposed to be working with them. Before that, she was like this. I don't know what to do. I don't know. What do you think, Scott? When she checked in with the truth, the will arose. And she was steadfast like a rock. Wow, I'm not supposed to work with them. This is the power of having a community, a spiritual community, right? Because we all get hit. No matter how much spiritual work we've done, no matter how much spiritual practice we do, the universe has a way of zinging us. Getting right in there. Here's another piece you need to look at. And we can support each other so much by saying, and have you turned within? Have you turned to the source? What is the truth? Because the truth is where true commitment is, and commitment invites will. This is why we invite you time and time again to have a daily spiritual practice. That when we pray and meditate, we are bringing a focus, a concentration to something other than the activity of our mind. So that no matter how activated our mind is, or no matter what kind of space we find ourselves, like a busy train station or something, we still in our consciousness have that place of quiet stillness where we can hear that inner voice, that inner knowing that is the truth. And it brings us back to the ground of being. and allows us to really be what we are here to be. It's so important in our lives that we live our dreams, those heart desires, that we follow the natural unfolding of what's happening in our capacities, the things that we're drawn to. Because you see, not only do they invite us to break open, but also they develop in us a sense of satisfaction with life. I did that. I can do this. And when we live our life, it has impact on the world. It inspires other people. We bring into manifestation things for the good of the world. But we're going to hit roadblocks along the way. And those roadblocks are specifically attuned to us. They're there to help us to see that yet here is another area where we can break wide open. Here's an area where we can develop our capacity, where we can break through limitations of what we thought we were. But if we're not supported by the truth, it's very easy to be knocked off, to have the storm blow us off course, to convince ourselves that my judge is right. I was crazy for thinking I could do that. But when we realize that the support is in the truth, that the truth brings with it commitment, when we can allow the fish to swallow us, and with the commitment comes will. Oh yes, I can. And so this week, I just have a simple invitation for you. Can you let the fish of truth swallow you? Let's move into some time of meditation now. Why are we meditating? We're not meditating to go over our to-do list. We're not meditating to think about anything. We're meditating to develop that orientation towards the stillness. We're making an open space within us to hear the quiet nudge of Spirit. And so as we take a few deep breaths, and if you're comfortable, you could close your eyes again. Bring your attention to someplace other than the activity of your mind. Bring it gently into your breathing. Pay attention to the in and out of your chest. Or if you are like me and like the cost center down near the belly button, just bring your focus there. Don't beat yourself up if your focus, you find yourself 50 miles down the track thinking about something else. Just gently bring it back. Bring it back. It's a practice. We'll sit together now for the next several moments, allowing Spirit to be Spirit in us.